You've been asleep for 3 days. I took a liberty of dressing you.
No shit. Why can't I fucking die?
Take your mask off, Wade. We must talk.
This is Brian with Screenphiles.com and review. What I'm looking at today is Deadpool 2. Now, this was in the theaters a few months ago, coming back, I might add, and I'll get into that later. But I didn't see it then, and the reason being is I don't like the Fox X-Men movies, for the most part. They're very inconsistent in quality. Some are good. Well, I should say there are good ones. But on the whole, they're not terribly good. And they don't treat these characters with the respect and reverence I think they deserve. So I stay away from them. And when Deadpool came out, well, I saw Deadpool, the original, in theaters. When I saw 2, it felt very much more of the same, plus released by Fox. So wasn't terribly interested in it. Having seen it finally, it's funny. It has funny moments, but one of the reasons I didn't see it was that I thought that his whole shtick was kind of boorish. I mean, some people call Deadpool a very adult movie, and it isn't. It's actually infantile and childish, and it's not bad for that, I might add. In fact, it's kind of funny, but it's very one note. And it's not adult at all. It's, I don't know, like a kid talking about poopy pants or some such thing. It's very childish. So I've been of the belief that those movies don't need to be as over-sexualized, as violent, as risque as they tend to be. That's not a criticism of violent, risque movies. Some are great. I mean, RoboCop is awesome. But nonetheless, this movie doesn't need to be that way. Another thing is that it's actually, and this sounds contradictory to what I just said, but roll with this for a second, it will make sense. It actually isn't as risque as it likes to think it is. Initially, with Deadpool 2, it starts off at this manic pace, and all kinds of bizarre, crazy stuff happens. But then it settles into a groove and becomes a very conventional, very much a movie we've all seen before. It has moments like that, in which it's very, almost experimental, frankly. And then it just becomes a regular movie. Then it's experimental again. Then it's a regular movie. And just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It's not innovative, really. The first one was the same way. Interesting moment, conventional movie for most of the time. Another interesting moment. So the whole argument that Deadpool and Deadpool 2 are so adult and the cursing is required and this, that, and the other is nonsense. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I've always thought that Deadpool would fit perfectly in the MCU. He doesn't need to curse so much. He doesn't need as much violence. it can be all toned down and still maintain the essence of the character. Because the character in the comics, there's violence in comics to be sure, but we're not talking about Faust, for Christ's sakes, with Deadpool. Most of the violence is unseen or suggested, and the comic is just fine. It's not needed in the movies either. And it is interesting, I'll give it that, but it's not necessary to the character. So with the merger, I should say, with Disney buying the studio assets of 20th Century Fox, Deadpool is coming home, so to speak, to Marvel Studios, where he belongs. And I think the character will do just fine there. He can do the talking to the screen thing. He can do all the meta stuff he tends to do without so much of the violence, and not so much of the cursing, and not so much of the overt sexuality. That's perfectly fine. It is not at all necessary to this movie. It wasn't necessary to the first movie, it's not necessary to this movie. And I think it'd be cool. This is Brian. It was pretty good. As I forgot to mention that Deadpool 2 is a pretty good movie. But it's interesting. Ryan Reynolds is, as usual, charismatic and just fun to watch. The story gets a little long in the tooth, though. In fact, if I were the studio, I could have easily have cut 15, 20 minutes from this movie, and it probably would have flowed better. It starts to drag towards the middle. Trim it down, get it flowing better. But it's still an entertaining movie. As I said, I think it's the gratuitous violence, which is interesting, by the way, but not necessary to this character. Could be done away with. The cursing could be done away with. The sexual references can be done away with. But other than that, it's enjoyable. If those type of things are reasons you go to the movies, you're going to love Deadpool 2. And I know that there was something I said I would get back to. I literally forgot it. I work live without a net, no script. So if something vanishes from my head, it just vanishes.